Every list has a number 1. Hey guys, guess what? Today we're doing a few new things. First off, this is my first branch into list videos. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I love lists. But more importantly, we're joined by GameTaco. Say hi, man.
Hello, Focie. Thanks for having me on your channel.
Nah, man, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Want to get this list on the way?
Yeah, sure. So, have you ever played a game where you found yourself so completely absorbed or immersed that you and your controller just melded together into one being? So immersed that you forget you're playing a game sometimes, and then all of a sudden, BAM! Some poorly executed stealth section comes out of nothing and just pulls you right out of it? Well, this top 10 list is dedicated to moments like those. It's the top 10 shittiest game mechanics in otherwise awesome games.
And as a little caveat, we'd like to mention that it might not be the mechanics themselves that are bad, but rather the way that they were implemented in the game.
Yep, that, and that the games featured on this list are games that I think are genuinely good games. And if it's on the list, it means it's a game I love. It's just neat to sometimes look at the less than stellar parts and learn from one's mistakes.
But enough talk! How about you?
Number 10. Kicking off this list at number 10 is something I have to admit that I don't outright hate, but it replaced something I loved. Probing in Mass Effect 2. See, in Mass Effect 1, you had this really neat moon buggy you could drive around in. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but I had a lot of fun with it. What do we have in Mass Effect 2 instead?
Probe launched.
Yay. Number 9. Out of all the Zelda games, Wind Waker has to be one of my favorites. In fact, I can't decide which one I like more, Wind Waker or Majora's Mask. But I digress. The feeling of adventure on the high seas is amazing, and Windfall Island is such a beautiful place to chill. Friendly folk walking around, a beautiful soundtrack, and just generally great vibes. But first, we gotta get there. So, you just started the game. You got your sword, you beat up some baddies, and you rescued the tough-as-nails Tetra, captain of a pirate ship. Your sister has been captured by a fabulous bird. And you've tracked the bastard to the Forsaken Fortress. You've gotten a taste of combat from earlier, and now you want revenge. You're even gonna be catapulted into the base. Hell yeah! I'm so ready to— Yeah, you know where this is going, don't you? Mandatory undercooked stealth sections. Aw, and just when I was getting into the groove too. They take away your sword and force you to go cosplay as Old Snake by hiding barrels and stuff. It's slow, tedious, and you also have to find a way to turn off the floodlights so you don't get spotted. The worst part is that you're not even safe while hiding either. Friggin' rats can come knock you out of the barrel while you're sitting right next to a pig moblin. And guess what that means, kids? You get thrown in prison and you gotta start all over again. To me, this is the least fun part of the game, and one I never look forward to whenever I start a new journey in this otherwise awesome game. Number 8. Metal Gear Solid 5 is a fantastic game. At least if you ignore that it was supposed to have a story. So what could I be complaining about mechanics-wise here then? Well, nothing is actually wrong with the gameplay itself, but there is one thing that bothers me a lot. The series has a huge anti-nuke message, and this game is even going above and beyond by hiding an 8-minute cutscene behind a criterion that pretty much guarantees that nobody will ever see it legit. The cutscene only plays once there are no nukes left in the world owned by players. Wow, that's actually impressive. A lot of effort for something that will never happen. Don't worry, as per usual, Snake almost doesn't say a single word here either. But still, big kudos for the effort and all. So tell me, with the game being this anti-nuke, why is there a trophy for making nukes? It goes against the core philosophy of the game. I know it doesn't have to be done online, so people can still make the nuke and not hinder the progress to get the cutscene. But it's clear that the game is saying that nukes are bad, so why do they reward you for making one at all? It just doesn't seem right to me. Oh well, maybe Kojima can grace us with some DLC that helps fill in the story gaps, or— Oh, wait. Yeah, that happened. Ooh, good job, Konami. Ooh, yeah, good job.
Number 7.
Skyward Sword is a very polarizing game among gamers. I think that its story and characters, especially between Link and Zelda, were really good. But gameplay-wise, there is not a lot to do other than progress to the next temple. It was pretty linear, and that's a huge split right there. But I think the biggest split between gamers came with the motion controls. Some people felt it was incredibly unresponsive, and others had no problems with it at all. I got used to them after a while, personally, so that's not my concern. No, my main issue was with how unnecessary a lot of them felt. Take this example. You're flying on a majestic bird. Well, a little derpy looking, but still, majestic! You've got an analog stick and a bunch of buttons. How do you fly this thing? By flailing your Wiimote up and down like a dork. It doesn't even feel like it simulates flying since you gotta point the Wiimote towards your TV, or else you can't steer the bird at all. Look, I like motion controls, I really do. I think they're a fun addition to the game that can test your skills in ways you haven't been tested before. I love that. But this just feels unnecessary. It doesn't feel like it adds anything to the experience, and it feels like it was tacked on to force a gimmick. You can do better, Nintendo. Come on.
Also, the cloud overworld felt really empty, so there's that too.
Number 6.
So, you've heard me praise Earthbound to Kingdom Come, but there's actually a mechanic I dislike there. Having to farm for the Sword of Kings. It's an item that only has a 1 in 128 chance of dropping, and only from one specific enemy in one specific area of the game that leaves the game forever once you finish that area. Sure, it's an optional item, I hear you argue, but it's Pooh's only weapon in the entire game. Of course you don't want to pass that up. So, minutes pass, and so do the levels. Hours later, you still haven't found the damn sword, but at least the enemies aren't giving you trouble anymore. Heck, when you finally get the sword, you won't even need it anymore, but you still won't quit. You've already spent this much time trying to get it. Might as well go all the way, right? Ugh, I didn't like it then, and I sure won't like it the next time either.
Number 5.
Speaking of grinding, hey, Taco, don't you do Monster Hunter stuff?
Yeah, most of the content on my channel is related to Monster Hunter. I guess you could say I've hunted a monster or two before.
Sweet. Why don't our Monster Hunter expert do the next one then?
Alright, so Monster Hunter is just an absolutely wonderful series. It's challenging and fun, it has a great community, there's depth to the mechanics, but it's understandably a niche title. If you have a string of bad luck, you can expect to hunt monsters dozens of times just to get a single item required to upgrade your weapon or your armor. Now, I don't have a problem with farming certain monsters for their armor sets and weapons, but let's be honest, it can be frustrating when it takes you 36 gold beards to get that one single item that you need. Now, personally, I'm convinced that the game knows that you want a certain item, and it's not giving it to you because it's just plain spiteful. This desire sensor, I guess, is a cruel experiment cleverly disguised by Capcom to see how much we can take and measure how discouraged we get whenever we hunt a cuckoo for the 8th time and we still don't get the goddamn ear that we need for a new weapon. Now, that's not to say Capcom isn't taking steps to reduce some of the monotonous grind. Newer entries to the series have added alternatives to hunting monsters yourself, such as sending out NPCs or your cats to hunt, but it can still be discouraging to get stuck on one item while making your dream set.
Number 4.
Bloodborne is a stellar game. It can also be quite challenging, so you're always in need of health items. I find the theme of blood really interesting in this game, and I like that your health comes from the blood vials you take from the enemies you defeat. There is, however, a catch to this. You have to get these vital vials from enemy drops, so if you get stuck on a particularly difficult boss and run out of reserves, you've gotta go back to Yharnam and farm for the damn things. It kills the pacing for me completely, especially when all I want to do is get back to the boss and maybe try a new tactic. Sure, you can buy the vials from the bath messengers, but let's face it, they're expensive. And considering blood echoes are not only your currency, but also your experience for levels, it feels wasted to buy them instead of farming for them. So that means you're left at the grinder.
Number 3.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was a real game changer when it came out. It was an absolute blast to play, and its success ended up saturating the gaming market for what seemed like a small eternity. They're even remaking the game. Do you know what I hope doesn't make it into the remake? The infinitely respawning enemies that suddenly stop coming after you cross an arbitrary point in the world. There are places where you can shoot enemies forever, but they never stop coming. You're super vulnerable on higher difficulties too, so you don't want to leave your cover. Reckless running seems like a bad idea, but that's exactly what you should be doing, lest you be there for a while. It just feels cheap, and you can beat the section so easily by just sprinting through it, letting your squad do all the rest. Sometimes infinite enemies can be a great way to build tension, but when the player discovers this little trick, you're taken right out of it, and it feels cheap. This is something that is too bad, especially when you consider that the rest of the game is so much fun.
Number 2.
Dark Souls is always cited to be the pinnacle of game design, and I always hear how every death is your own fault and how the game is hard but fair.
Hey, people say the same thing about Monster Hunter. Do you think the series are similar in some way?
Yeah, they might be, Taco. They might be. Anyway, I'm here to say that only almost every death is your own fault. It only happens a couple of times in the game, but I dislike the floor crumbling underneath you, especially when you can't see it coming. Now I know nobody liked the Bed of Chaos fight, partly because of this, but my beef lies with the stray demon in the asylum. That floor is such a trollish trap.
But wait, Focie, I hear you cry out. The floor was clearly weakened from your fight earlier with the other demon.
Well, you can't see any difference with the floor between then and now. Plus, after the last fight, you could still walk on it just fine. There was no way you could have seen that coming without hindsight.
But you can see the demon underneath that floor in the beginning of the game.
Yes, you can, but by the time you return, you'd likely have found several illusory walls, so the notion that you missed one in the asylum is a much more likely one than the floor giving in, what with Occam's razor and all. Now, I want you to understand that this isn't a huge deal, it's just that Dark Souls is such a friggin' excellently designed game that it hurts a bit more when something is off, you know? If falling through the floor kills you, or the boss does, since you now took a bunch of damage, I wouldn't call that your fault. At least not entirely.
Number 1.
For our number 1, it's the HMs in newer Pokémon games. Now, in Generation 1 to 4, HMs had unlimited uses over TMs that you could only use once. This gave them a bit of utility, as you could always have a fairly strong move on some of your Pokémon, and they also gave you access to areas that you previously couldn't access before. In Generation 5, this changed. TMs became unlimited use, and now the only thing differing HMs and TMs were that HMs couldn't be forgotten easily. This started to make HMs feel obsolete, and rather something you had to do in order to get all the items you wanted. It sucks to have 2 out of your 6 slots reserved for HM slaves, but what bothered me the most was how long it took to do anything when you got to the water part of Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire. Go to the water's edge, press A. Ooh, text box. Answer yes to surf. Watch a cutscene of you using your Pokémon. Surf for a few meters to the dive spot. Press A. New text box. Answer yes to dive. Watch another cutscene. Get to the bottom of the water. Look around. Nothing of value. Press A. New text box. Answer yes to resurface. Watch the same cutscene again. Resurface. Get out of the water and rinse and repeat once you need to surf again. It's alright to begin with, but after a while this just becomes annoying. Couple that with how you're always at 66% capacity due to 2 HM slaves, and the whole thing just feels like it should go away. At least make it so that I can surf automatically when I go to the edge of the water. That would save so much time.
Game Freak, please.
And there you have it. That was a bit of an ordeal, but thank you for sticking around. Ginormous thank you to GameTaco for agreeing to do this with me. You're seriously awesome, man. And thank you for some of the footage.
Pleasure was all mine. See you later, Focie.
If you want to check out his stuff, you can visit his channel here. It's mainly Monster Hunter stuff, but he commands the dual blades in a way that I never could. I highly recommend checking it out. But for now, thank you guys for watching. I can't believe how supportive you guys are, and you guys seriously make it all worth it. Now, in true Monster Hunter Generations fashion,